So good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to welcome entrepreneur, industry disruptor, serial entrepreneur, best-selling author, and founder of Health Optimizing, all the way out of Norway, Thomas Aksnes. So welcome, Thomas.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me on the show.
So, Thomas, firstly, I'd like to congratulate you on all your achievements. Can you please share with us how your entrepreneurial journey started?
Well, it started as a need to find solutions to my own health problems. So I was really, really ill when I was young, and the current medical system couldn't really help me. Actually, just made things much worse with the different meds I was given. I just got sicker and sicker. And I just had to find a solution to my own problems, and I managed surprisingly easy. And then obviously I saw that there are more people than me in the world who needs help with their health, and I was really onto something, and it was kind of out of necessity in a way, and then it became a mission. I just felt that I had a mission to create a new medical paradigm and to help all those millions of people who are not currently helped by the way things are done in medicine.
Amazing. So Health Optimizing is your mythology, has helped over 60,000 clients across the world with many health challenges. So can you please share with us more about this?
Yeah, so one of the most unique things about what we do is that we're high tech. We have 32 state-of-the-art technologies, and we implement new medical technologies right away. So there's a huge lag in the healthcare system when it comes to implementation of new technologies. In Norway, the official number is 18 years. So that's the lag from a technology is approved for use in a clinical setting until it is actually being utilized. It's 18 years. And you know, if you look back to what your mobile phone looked like 18 years ago, you see how much...
It's like a brick.
Exactly. So you see how much has happened when it comes to technological advancements in those 18 years. And it's the same in medicine. It's just that we have a system where, like, when new technologies don't fit inside the current box, they're not going to be included into the current box. That's why I feel that it's the box actually that needs to change.
Yes.
So the way the system works today is that all these really revolutionary assessment technologies and therapeutic technologies, they are not being utilized just based on how the system is built up and how also there are industries who want to keep things the way they are. So what I decided to do is just to build a new system on the side of that to actually create that new box where all the new technologies fit in.
Yes.
And also what is really unique about what we do is that, first of all, we honor that the body has its own self-healing, self-regulating mechanisms, and that we should support these mechanisms rather than overriding them.
Yes.
And then to resolve any type of problem, you really need to get to the roots of the problem. You need to find out what's causing the problem. And that's what we're able to do in a lot of instances now with all these technologies that we have, is that we can find out what the roots of the problem would be, and basically what the different causations are for each individual's health challenges. And that is why we also have a possibility of resolving these issues, because we can get to the roots.
Yeah, that's amazing. So as the founder of the unique worldwide clinic concept called Health Optimizing, can you tell us more about the clinic for those who don't know?
Yes, so the clinics, we have medical doctors there, we have therapists there. You know, there are two legal frameworks for clinics. There's one for medical treatments and there's one for complementary and alternative treatments. We are actually in both categories because we like to do things all encompassing. So we need to look at all aspects of the health issues. Of course, the medical and the physical and the biochemical, but also the energetic and the emotional A lot of problems have some sort of psychosomatic component, a weakening that made it easier for a problem to develop. So we have psychologists dealing with that aspects, we have medical doctors dealing with the medical aspects, and we have therapists dealing with the other aspects. But the main thing here is that we're utilizing all the state-of-the-art technologies from all over the world, so that when you put amazing breakthrough technologies in the hands of the best professionals who already know their field of expertise as well as anyone can, that's when really magic can happen. So to give good tools in the hand of good people. And then also it's the way that everything is working together. So it's not like different sections where you choose, do you want to do this or do you want to do that? It's like an integrative process where first we start with a very comprehensive assessment. Like if you go to a medical doctor and you say, I want to test everything, you might get about 50 different factors tested. And that's very, very limited. It's like having a huge jigsaw puzzle that you only have 50 pieces for. And then you're told to put these pieces together and try to see what picture it forms. It's impossible because you don't have enough pieces. So we can measure about 20,000 pieces of the jigsaw, which still doesn't cover everything, but it's enough in most cases to see the overall picture. And once you have enough pieces of the jigsaw to see the overall picture, you also know a lot about the missing pieces. So from our 9 technology, quite all-encompassing assessment, we also know what other assessments we need to do. So that's when we will do the biochemical test or other specialist tests after already knowing what the gaps are in the jigsaw. And then once we mapped out what is not functioning right, and then gone really deep into why is it not functioning right, like what are the underlying causations that made it possible for this problem to develop, what are the trigger factors that trigger the development, and also why didn't our intrinsic self-healing, self-regulating mechanisms have the capacity to deal with this when it was early emerging. So once we mapped out that, we make a protocol where we deal with each and every aspect of the health issue itself, in each and every aspect of the underlying causations, the trigger factors, and also what has to do with our capacity to regulate the way we are created to. And then by addressing each involved factor with whatever the best methodology is available in the world today to address these factors, then once all factors are resolved, there is a potential for healing, and even things that are considered chronic are no longer chronic when the causations are gone and when each aspect of the problem is resolved. So we're not giving any guarantee that we can fix any type of health problem, and in our vocabulary it's not about curing diseases, it's just about finding specific factors that needs to be dealt with and dealing with them in the best possible way. And when people heal from that, it's a self-healing. It's your own self-healing, self-regulating mechanisms that then has the potential for healing.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. So as a young child, which you obviously touched on earlier, you had many health issues yourself. So was there something when you grew up that motivated you to find solutions? And is this what led to you starting health optimizing?
Well, yes. So the motivation obviously was my own illnesses. I was actually so sick that I couldn't be out with other people. I couldn't really function. I was just, for the most part, at home studying. So I developed good studying habits. Like for fun, I read the Britannica Encyclopedia. So it's like, so I turned into this weird studying.
A bookworm, right?
Yeah, a bookworm, yeah. But the other thing is, everything also comes down to mindset when it comes to what direction you choose in life. And I grew up with a scientific mindset because I grew up in a family of top renowned scientists. So my parents are top renowned scientists. My mother is heading the development of blood products at the main hospitals here. My father was heading artificial intelligence projects for the oil industry, where they're building these fully automatic oil rigs and things on the North Sea. I grew up, we built our house next to my grandparents' house, and my grandfather was the dean at the chemistry faculty at the main university here, and his brother was the dean of the physics faculty, and there were 4 brothers and all professors and deans. It's like when you grow up in that kind of environment, everything is just about science, and it's a special way that you learn to think. So then when the so-called modern medicine couldn't do anything with my health problems, and when I couldn't really live with my health problems, I didn't have a quality of life. Yes. Then with that mindset, it kind of became obvious that I needed to figure this out myself. And I would say it took a while before I started thinking that way, because when you have that mindset around science, you also believe in science. And I believe that these thousands of brilliant medical researchers out there in the world, that eventually they would be able to solve my problems. So I believed for so many years that I just had to hang in there, and then these brilliant researchers would find a way. I just, had to hang in there until it happened. Yeah. Then what I realized, and this was when my doctor, who was the leading professor of medicine specializing in my kind of illnesses, when he told me that you can never ever recover from this. It has developed to the point where there is no recovery. So you have to just change all your plans for your life and find ways to live with this.
Wow, that's seriously awful.
Yeah, I was like 18 and a half or something like that.
That's like your life's over.
But the strange thing is when you hear that you can never have a normal life, and you can never have a quality life, and until that you just believed you had to hang in there until things would change, then you would expect that you get some sort of down or maybe even depression. But actually the opposite happened. Yeah. I woke up at that moment and I still remember how surprised I was of my own reaction. It's like I had this huge smile, and I just felt that, well, finally it's up to me. It's like I got the power back. Instead of just sitting waiting for all the scientists to solve it, I was now told that would never happen. So then it gave me an opportunity to try to find solutions. And then what I quickly found is that, even if you have the most brilliant minds, if they're working reductionistically in a certain direction, if that direction is wrong, then, or if it's not, at least for me, the right direction, then you will never get there. It's like if you're driving down the road, if you have the best car in the world and it's the best road in the world, but if you're driving the wrong direction, you will get the wrong place.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what I realized, that we actually need a different direction. And that's when I started reading about, first of all, what are the alternatives? Yes. So I started self-studying alternative medicine. And what I found is that alternative medicine has a good philosophy. It's a philosophy that you support the body to heal itself. Yes. But it's quite non-specific, and you're only dealing with a certain aspect, whatever that aspect is, often an energetic aspect. And by dealing with one aspect, you can prevent problems, you can maybe feel better, but you can't really expect to solve extreme health challenges. Yeah. But I like the philosophy. So that's when I started thinking that if we can use that philosophy, but instead of just dealing with one aspect, we can deal with all aspects. And instead of doing things in like thousands of years old traditional ways, we can utilize technologies. And I was very early on with technologies. My father actually built the first PC in Norway as his doctorate at the university, and I had that in my room. So I was very early on with technologies and had a fascination for that. And I believe that the future is in technologies in most industries. So it was like merging the idea of healing yourself or stimulating the body's own intrinsic self-healing, self-regulating mechanisms, but doing it specifically and in an all-encompassing way, dealing with every aspect of the problem, and doing so with technologies and also being part of the development of such technologies.
Amazing. So obviously I'm going to lead on in terms of the technology. So your focus obviously has been around developing technology and methodologies while providing real solutions across 5 different continents, utilizing health optimizing methodologies worldwide. So how has the use of technology impacted and helped your patients using these methodologies, and do you have any examples that you can talk about? You just referenced it.
Well, yeah. So, the philosophy itself, just to help the body with, stimulating the intrinsic self-healing, self-regulating mechanisms is not really that new. It's just that it wasn't possible to do it effectively before we had the technological advancements that we had the last 2 decades. Even the father of modern medicine, Hippocrates, he said that illness do not come upon us out of the blue. It's developed from small sins daily against nature. When enough sins have accumulated, illness will suddenly appear. So it's that overloading of our intrinsic mechanisms to deal with the problems is what accumulates illness.
Yeah.
And that was one really important part of it, is to make sure we don't overload these mechanisms. But then if you're just going to change everything, you need to turn your life upside down, and it's not that easy. But if you can find out with technologies exactly what changes would matter, if you can find out which lifestyle changes will make a huge impact and give you maybe half the capacity back to deal with new threats and current health challenges, then that is one part that really makes an impact, is to just find out what is it that you can change in your life to make sure that you have the capacity to deal with whatever challenge you're facing. And then the other part is to be able to help with things that has manifested as a chronic problem. Everything is multifactorial, so there's always multiple causative factors. There are multiple underlying causations, multiple trigger factors, multiple factors involved with the problem itself. And to be able to solve something that has really heavily manifested as a chronic illness, then you need to deal with all the factors at a causative level, at least all the primary factors, and also most of the factors that has to do with the problem itself. And then you can't deal with those unless you know what they are. So I would say the main thing here is that initial assessment, where we find out what's not working right, and then why things are not working right, like why it has developed to these dysfunctions, and then to be able to make a plan for dealing with that. And our protocols then combine what we need to do at the clinic with technologies. We do that, and typically it's a matter of days because we have quite effective technologies for resolving specific factors. So this is, again, it's not about curing disease. It's about dealing with specific aspects that are behind, why you have that disease in the first place. And then simultaneously to also find out what can you do yourself in your lifestyle so you don't create the problem again like you created it in the first place. And we kind of specialize in those people who don't get a lot of help elsewhere. So those people who have some chronic illness that the normal medical system cannot help them with that, or some complex situations where they have either multiple diagnoses or they don't have a diagnosis at all because they don't really know what's going on, and things like chronic fatigue. And also the more serious issues, like we've had a lot of people who came to us because they had been given a date for amputating their foot. And it's very interesting how people don't look for alternatives until...
No, they just take the first word that comes out of the doctor.
It's like people are okay with having ailments for some reason. I don't really see that because...
I think people are just passive. That's what I think.
But it's like if you have a dent in your car, you don't want to drive around with that and you want to fix it. But like if it's your health, you have a dent or you have some ailments and you're in pain and you have all these different problems and you're low on energy and, you get completely exhausted after a day at work and whatever it is, it's like somehow we're okay with that. I don't think we should be okay with that.
No.
So, yeah, where was I?
Oh, sorry. So you were just talking about...
So this was my what I wanted to get to, that for some reason people are okay with their ailments, but they look for alternatives if they have enough motivation for that. And that's what disease is. In my book, disease is motivation. It's motivation to do things differently and to find out what's actually going on. And if there is such a disease that you get a level of despair, that's when people start looking for alternatives. So, for example, with diabetic ulcers, like people who has diabetes and they have an ulcer that won't heal and the wound is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, then what the so-called modern medicine can offer is to amputate the leg. Eventually, first they try just to clean the wound, and maybe 2 years down the line, the wound just gets bigger and bigger, and there's like an open crater, and then suddenly you get a date for amputation. That's when people look for other solutions. It's when they have that date already.
Yeah.
And we've had 63 people so far who already had the date for amputation, and we managed to save all of their legs. Because it's not that difficult. The diabetic ulcer, it's actually quite simple. It's just a few factors. One factor is that there's a lack of nitric oxide there. So we have a machine that can create nitric oxide gas and put it directly to the wound. Another factor is that the cell voltage potential is too low. So we have a machine that can increase the cell voltage potential so that you can exchange ions properly. And that is absolutely necessary for the mitochondrial function, the power plants of the cells. Then usually there is an infection, which is not why it started, but it's a consequence of it. So we have also a technology where we can destruct whatever the pathogen is directly. And then we have a technology to stimulate the self-healing processes, which are usually kind of the situation often adapts to as a new norm. So even though the body has mechanisms to heal something, a lot of times these mechanisms are not active. So once we've created conditions for healing, we need to reactivate those mechanisms that we have for healing. Yes. So with a combination of those four things, we have been able to solve 63 out of 63 where people already had a date for amputation and where they could keep their leg. So I think that's your example. I could give many examples, but I think the whole point here is more about the philosophy and the need for doing individualized medicine to find out what's your problem. Like you can have 100 people with the same diagnosis, so they think they have the same problem, but they don't, because there's a different combination of causations behind that. So if we have 100 people with the same diagnosis, we still need 100 different protocols. So maybe there's one factor that 20 of them have. Maybe there's another factor that 10 of them have. And then there's another factor that only one of them have. And then, but they all might have like 5 to 15 different primary factors that needs to be dealt with. And they're different, even though the symptoms might be similar.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's the whole point. We need to do the proper assessment, and we need to do things individualized. We need to do what matters. And we also need to stop the further development of the disease. And why not even stop it before there is disease? You know, why not find out what is developing in the wrong direction and what can I do in my lifestyle to stop developing these problems? You know, that's kind
prevention is better than cure, right?
Yes, it is. And you know, philosophically, that's where I want to get to. I think it is important for us to be able to help the people who are the sickest, because it gives a proof of concept. Well, obviously, these people really need our help, so it feels good to help them, and it's important to help those who are the most in need, obviously. But I think that where we need to move to is that we have a health paradigm where people actually acknowledge that we have self-healing, self-regulating mechanisms. We should not override them. We should support them. We should make sure that these mechanisms we have for regulation have the capacity to deal with whatever we are being challenged with. And then we can prevent pretty much every health problem.
Yes. So that leads me to this global pandemic and COVID-19, which has impacted and changed our lives forever. How do you believe this has changed the future of medicine and telemedicine? And do you believe this has accelerated the use of technology in medicine? And how do you marry the two while still keeping a personal face-to-face treatment?
Wow. That was a lot of questions in one.
Sorry, I was just trying
you know, I think that the world has gone mad, you know, to be honest. but there's a lot to learn from what's happening here. You know,
100%.
one thing, and I hope that the world will learn from this. And one thing is that people who are healthy and are not extremely old, they are not at high risk from getting COVID-19. So I think the main learning point from this pandemic is that we actually need to be more proactive about health. You see that people who are at risk of dying, they are either very, very old, or they have some life-threatening disease of some sort, or they are on immune suppressant medication. Maybe they had an organ transplant or whatever, and then the question is why did something develop to the point where they needed a new organ? So of course, it's not 100% preventable, obviously, but what we see is that those people who are healthy and are not at an extremely high age, for them this is equivalent of a normal flu, which we do see as a normal thing. And actually, when you look at the statistics, a lot of people die from the flu too.
Yeah, of course. Every year.
And it's the same thing. It's those people who are either very old or are immune compromised in some way. So I think that what is very interesting here is that most people, in my experience, they only want to do something about their health if they are sick. Like they need some symptom as a motivation to make a change.
Yeah.
So when I talk to people about healthy lifestyle, for example, a lot of people are not motivated to make any changes because why would they? They're not sick. They don't think that there is any point.
Yeah.
And when you look at statistics, you will see that the majority in the Western world do not prioritize their health.
Yeah.
So when you look at what they prioritize, it's income, it's family, it's all sorts of things. But on that list, health is really far down on their priority list.
Yeah.
And then something like this happens and people understand that actually maybe we need to prioritize health, because those people who have a good health are actually not doing so bad in this. You know, they can have COVID-19 and they're fine. And those people who allow themselves to become hugely obese or to destroy, you know, liver and kidneys maybe with alcohol or whatever it was, and they need a transplant and then to be on immune suppressants, or they have a very bad lifestyle and develop all sorts of cardiovascular disease, or maybe they even had a genetic disposition for some cardiovascular disease and they just didn't care and compensate for that or do anything about that. They just accepted that as how life turned out for them. Like now, I think that the majority of people, it will be very interesting to see statistics now after this pandemic. But my guess...
Which is totally inaccurate, by the way.
Yeah, but my guess is that if we would do a poll 6 months from now to see at what level people prioritize their health, I think you will see that they will prioritize health as one of top 3.
Yeah.
And this is not how it used to be. And if that is the case, then I think that's actually a very good outcome or side effect. You know, I think that is a good thing.
Yeah. So health optimizing clinics are not the only place, health optimizing clinics are not only a place where patients come for existing treatments, but also preventative treatments. So can you share with us more about that? You did touch on it earlier, but maybe just give us some examples.
Yeah, so like what can you do preventatively? Well, one thing is lifestyle, and I think most people understand that lifestyle does make an impact on health. Like the diet does make an impact on health. Most people, I think, know that, but it's not exactly the same diet that is right for everyone, because people have different challenges.
Yes,
some people might have a problem with not having enough stomach acid. Some people might have a problem with the pyloric valve between the stomach and the duodenum. Some people might have some bowel flora imbalance. Some people might have something else. It's like the way you break down the food, and ultimately when it comes to diet, it's how you're able to utilize nutrients and how you're able to avoid adverse reactions to something you eat. And that mostly comes down to how you're able to break down the food.
Yes.
So to map out the whole digestive system and see if there are any challenges, and then to fix those challenges, then even without changing the diet, you can do much better. And then also to find out which factors would you benefit from in changing your diet, because like for some people they feel better going on a vegan diet, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that is the optimal.
The right
for other
thing.
people, that doesn't really work well. For some people it's one thing they need to cut out because they simply can't break that down. And for some people it's not so much about changing their diet, but it's more about fixing something in their digestive system. What is important is that we break down the food properly, that it doesn't rot in the intestines, because all these problems like with a microflora imbalance and with leaky gut syndrome and all these different discomforts in the digestive system, usually it has to do with food rotting in the intestines because it's not broken down properly. So you need to find that balance with finding out what's not working right, fixing that, and if there are changes that is needed in the diet, then also to make those changes, but to make the right changes. So people have different needs. For example, we've seen people who decided to go on a vegan diet, and then they had insulin resistance and already challenges maybe from having a too high carb diet. And then once they went on a vegan diet, they went on a much higher high carb diet. And then their insulin resistance turned into diabetes. And we've seen, examples of people who decided to cut out gluten. And, I don't eat wheat gluten myself, but that's because I know that I don't break down wheat gluten well enough. And from that knowledge, I decide not to eat wheat gluten, but I eat other forms of gluten because I know that I can break down other forms of gluten. So it's like you should make the changes that you will benefit from, not just because one change is popular for whatever reason.
Yeah, exactly. Like these things also become very trendy, and
So there's even a study now that shows that those people who just change, the only lifestyle change they make is to go on a gluten-free diet. They use gluten-free substitutes, which are usually extremely high glycemic, and they have a statistical 20% increased risk of diabetes too.
Wow.
From that one change. And that doesn't mean that it was wrong to cut out the gluten. For some people it was right. Maybe even for most people it was right. But the point is you can't just then use substitutes that has another problem, like being extremely high carb. So you need to look at all aspects of it and not just follow one trend for one thing. And then also when it comes to the capacity we have to deal with whatever challenge is there, one thing is through lifestyle, that we don't over-consume that capacity, that we always need to spend capacity keeping things at bay, keeping things from being too problematic from the mistakes that we do in our lifestyle. But the other thing is that there might already be health problems that has developed, but we don't have a lot of symptoms from them because we might compensate for them. There's a lot of compensations going on in the body. Actually, a lot of times it's the compensations that doctors address pharmaceutically. An example is blood pressure. We have a blood pressure so that we can supply enough blood and oxygen to the tissue, and physically we're comprised of cells that are completely dependent on oxygen. Well, we also comprise of microorganisms and other things, but it's like the cells, that's kind of our most important physical component. And their main fuel is oxygen. It's not the only, but it's their main fuel. If we don't have the supply of blood and oxygen to the tissue, the cells cannot work properly, and they need to change their metabolism, or they need to hypofunction, or maybe change to an anaerobic glucose-driven metabolism, which could even lead to cancer. So the point here is that we have all these millions of mechanisms in the body, and everything is regulated to perfection. So if we have a reduced passage through the arteries, for whatever reason, we need to increase the pressure. Otherwise, we will not be able to supply enough blood and oxygen. and then you go to the doctor and you have an elevated blood pressure, then that should be taken as a sign that, okay, something is probably compromised in your vascular system, so you needed to increase the pressure. Now let's try to find out what is compromised. Let's try to fix that so that you no longer need that elevated blood pressure. That's how it should be. That's how it is in the health optimizing clinics when our doctors are evaluating it. But that's not how it is. The way it works today in most of the Western world is that if the blood pressure is high, we see that as a problem. And instead of trying to find out why it is high, we just try some sort of drug. And there's 5 different categories of things that can elevate the blood pressure. And then instead of finding out which category, because there are different medications for each category, then you just go with what statistically is the most common.
Yeah.
So you try first the drug that statistically is the most likely to reduce the blood pressure. But even if you reduce the blood pressure, maybe that addressed the wrong factor. Then you have the original problem that made you created the requirement for a higher blood pressure to be able to supply enough blood and oxygen to the tissue. Then you have the new problem that you created when you had a pharmaceutical intervention on something that was already okay.
Yeah.
And then you have a third problem is that now you're no longer supplying enough blood and oxygen to the tissue. So what's called the cardiac index, that's how many liters of blood is going through the vascular system per minute per square meter arteries. That is what is important, is that the cardiac index is good. So a lot of times you actually make things worse if you address the wrong factor and you only look at the compensation that is actually a very much needed compensation. Yeah. Another example is fever. You know, if you need to fight some sort of pathogen, your body will increase the temperature so that you can fight better. The immune system works better under higher temperature. So this is part of the solution. It's not part of the problem.
Yeah.
So when we then lower the fever with pills, what happens then is that we're working against the body's own mechanisms, and it will take longer to heal. And sometimes these infections even turn chronic because we couldn't fight them 100% when we didn't have that mechanism of elevated temperature.
Yeah.
And there are thousands of examples like that. But I think what is very important is that we all make the right choices and that we understand what is just a compensation that we actually need, and then to try to find out why is there a need for that compensation, and then to address that and to make the changes in the lifestyle that actually matters, and to find out what is already dysfunctional in the body. Even if there are no symptoms or no a diagnosed name for it, then maybe we're utilizing a lot of capacity, just keeping that at bay and finding that and fixing that. Then you have the capacity to deal with new threats, so that when you get exposed to the flu virus or the COVID or the SARS-CoV-2 virus or whatever it is, then you have the capacity to deal with that because you're not over-consuming that capacity, keeping things at bay and dealing with unhealthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
So that is the most important when it comes to the preventative part, is to find out what is not working right, why is it not working right, what are you utilizing a lot of capacity compensating for, what are the tweaks that you can do in your lifestyle, you know, without having to change everything and making things too difficult. What are the handful of tweaks you can do in your lifestyle that will make a massive impact, noticeable impact, measurable impact, and so that when you get exposed to whatever it is, you won't even feel it because you have the capacity to deal with it.
Yes, absolutely.
And then I just want to mention there's one more thing that can be done also. So what I just said is the most important, is to find the problems and fix that and to do the right things in the lifestyle. But there's also, for those who want to take it a step further, we actually have a technology also for daily optimization at the cellular level. So it's something called the health optimizing cell regulation, where you can actually regulate the exchange of ions over the cell membranes. So you can optimize the energy production in the cells. You can regulate the arterial walls so that you prevent the stiffness that comes with atherosclerosis, which comes with aging. You can boost energy production in times of need for that, and you can optimize how the cells are functioning very, very effectively by addressing that exchange of ions with something called health optimizing cell regulation. So that's the other category, and this is something that can be done at home or it can be done in the clinics. I do that myself actually every single day. It's the only thing I really take the time for, because I work pretty much 24/7, but I know that if I don't do that, I have to sleep more and rest more. So I do that so that I can keep up, with long, busy days.
Yes, absolutely. So that leads me to the next question. You've obviously spoken all over the world. You are an author. Was this a natural transition for you? And can you share with us more about the books you have written, as well as what you talk about when engaging as a speaker?
Well, yes. I've been speaking at more than 100 health conferences around the world, but it's like different every time. Usually these conferences have some sort of topic, and whatever the topic is, we probably have some good insight that we feel is important to share to that topic.
Yes.
So it's because we have a completely different way of doing things and different philosophy, and also with our extensive knowledge about all the new technologies. When it comes to the technological advancements, we are part of that from the prototype stage usually. Sometimes even before that, we're part of developing the technologies. We're working with the institutes who have the ground research. So sometimes we get into the collaboration at the prototype stage, sometimes even before, sometimes we even initiate it. But when it comes to the technological advancements in the health sector, then I think it's quite safe to say that we are by far the frontiers. And a lot of times it's that we that people at different conferences can benefit a lot from hearing how the latest advancements in technology can help in that segment that this conference is about. Yeah. And when I speak at conferences, what I find the most important is to provide value in the information I give. So we're not doing any marketing. Like we've never ever had an advertisement, and I've never gone like on stage to market our clinics or anything, because when you can do things that other clinics can't and you get results, then you also get a very powerful word of mouth. So it's not like we're lacking clients. We have a very powerful word of mouth, and we never ever did any advertisements. So I guess that's kind of proof of concept too, because we started first clinic in 2002. And we've since then built up clinics now in 5 continents, and they've all been built up without any advertisements. But of course, when I speak at different health conferences around the world, then yes, that does also create some interest that lead to not just people coming to the existing clinics, but also some people who wants to start clinics with us, because we have and that is an objective. We have really amazing methodologies, but we don't have capacity really to help everyone in need, and far from it. Yeah. So what we need to do is to build up our capacity. So our focus is on building more clinics. Yeah. So we have a very well-developed franchise model where we have all the education and all the support and all the systems and everything, so that now it is much easier for someone to start a clinic than it was just a couple of years ago. Yeah. And that is one of my objectives of doing any public appearance, is to see if there are some people who are interested in building clinics, because we need to improve our capacity so that we can help more people.
Yes, absolutely. So how has COVID-19 changed you personally, and what have you had to do to adapt both personally and within your practice during this time? And how do you feel this will change going forward?
Well, we had to close down the clinics in almost every country for a short period, just because of governmental regulations that we were not allowed to keep the clinics open. There were a couple of clinics that were allowed to keep them open under heavy restrictions, but most clinics had to close down for a couple of months. So of course that makes an impact in many different ways. But all the clinics are back and running now.
Yeah.
And now we are kind of struggling a little bit with travel restrictions. So there's a lot of people waiting to come from countries where they're not allowed to enter the countries where we have the clinics, because we don't have clinics in every country yet. We need to at some point, but we have a lot of clients traveling from all over the world, and there are still heavy restrictions. So that makes scheduling a little bit difficult, because they keep changing these different regulations. And like for August now in Bergen, we had a lot of people scheduled from United States, and then a couple of days ago they suddenly changed so that they're not allowed to come from the United States, because they suddenly had a new boom there with the COVID. So it makes things less predictable, and of course that is a hassle. Also at the clinics, we have all these restrictions, like we need to wash all the doorknobs and all the equipment, and we cannot have too many clients at the same time. And there's a lot of restrictions that make things, I would say, more difficult.
Yeah.
But we have studied the restrictions. We have highly motivated, really skillful staff in all the clinics, and I think they're doing a wonderful job within these restrictions. They understand that it's important to follow the restrictions, and them not making it harder than it already is. So actually I'm quite proud of our team in the different clinics, how they have been up for the task and done the most out of the situation.
Amazing. So
what I could also mention maybe is that for the COVID, I have a lot of information actually to give about the COVID, and I decided at some point to put everything into an article. So I don't know if it's okay that I mentioned that here, but
sure.
Okay, so healthoptimizingblog.com. I wrote a very, very extensive article about what you can do yourself to prevent getting the COVID, but also to prevent getting sicker than necessary if you do get it. So that's healthoptimizingblog.com, and I believe that we have helped a lot of people with that article.
Amazing. Well, I'll also put that up and share that link, when we share the podcast. So
awesome. Thank you.
You're involved in many moving parts, as well as training your staff and team. So how do you manage to do all this, as well as developing new technologies in the field of medicine?
Yes, that's a good question. So, one important aspect there is to be super healthy myself, to walk my talk.
Yes, of course.
So I've been working 100-hour weeks pretty much every week of the year for more than 20 years now. I don't think that is possible for anyone unless they do a lot for their health.
Yes.
So I do a lot for my health to make sure that I can do that without getting burned out, without getting tired and sloppy and not being able to perform my work well enough.
Yes.
So I use the cell regulation system every day. I eat extremely healthy. I do regular assessments to see where there might be a potential for improvement. So I really, really walk my talk. I make sure that I have the best possible capacity to be able to work around the clock. Also, I feel that it is important to kind of not just work, but to have some fun in life too.
Of course,
I don't have a lot of time for fun. I try to have compressed fun.
Yes.
So I do different types of extreme sport and racing, and that keeps me sane, I think.
Yes.
I'm really an adrenaline junkie. But I do a lot of calculations to find out how can I do these things safer.
Yeah.
So I really try to make sure that I don't take too high risks, because I'm on a mission to change the medical paradigm. And if I kill myself doing some extreme sport, then I don't think it will happen.
No.
So, although I think now it will. Our organization now can continue without me. But up until, I would say, the last year, I think everything would fall if I would fall. It's not like that anymore. Now it's at the point where it will continue without me. So maybe I can take more No, I don't know. But also to be able to do all of that, you need to be quite organized, and you need to keep the level of enthusiasm. But you can imagine, when you get daily feedback from people who are just crying because they're so happy, they've been sick for so many years, and now, their life has a quality again, and they're so appreciative, and it feels so good, to be able to help people, especially those who are the most in need. And it really fuels me, and it fuels our whole organization. So I think we're all in our organization able to put more work in because of the energy we get basically from the results we get.
Yes. So that brings me to the last question. What are the 3 key pieces of advice you would give to other entrepreneurs, and what legacy would you like to leave, or how would you like to be remembered?
Well, the 3 advices for entrepreneurs. So one thing is, I think that it's very difficult. Of course, I have to talk about how I see things, and we're all different. So my advices may not fit for everyone. But I think maybe the most important for me, the way I see things, is to be enthusiastic about what you do, to have that passion and that drive, to find the right thing to do. I think, I've told you how much effort I can put into my work, but if I was going to do some other stuff just to make money and where I didn't really help people, and where I didn't change the world, then I wouldn't be able to do that at all. I think I would like to have very short days, and I would be super bored of it, and I would just, try to have as much. I don't think it would work. I wouldn't be able to build up a business that was just a business. No. So I think to find something you're really passionate about, something that can make a difference in the world, something that can help other people and that you're passionate about, and that passion will give you all the energy you need to be able to do what you need to do. Because it is hard to be an entrepreneur, to start a business, to make that business work. It is freaking hard.
It is.
And if you don't have that fuel and that energy, I don't think many people can do it.
No.
But if you have that drive and that energy, and you're on a mission, and you're doing something great for the world, then I think most of us can actually have the energy to actually do it. Yes. So that's number 1 advice. I think number 2 is to get the right people involved, because you can't do everything yourself, and no matter how strong you are in certain areas, you're probably weak in other areas.
Yes.
And I think those people who try to do everything themselves, they will only get so far. So I think you need a team. And what I've learned is that team you need to put a lot of effort into finding the right people and to building the team. Yes. I think in the beginning, I took that too lightly, I think. I would hire people based on credentials. We would just, find a way to make it work. I've learned
we know that.
You need to build a culture for the team. You need team members who fit the culture. You need to do personality analysis, because some people could be great in one team and they could be a disaster in another team. So you need to build the teams with the people who fit well and who fulfill each other, not identical people, but people who together as a team is much stronger than they would be outside of that team. And you need every part of that team so that you don't have a big piece missing of that team. So I think building the teams with the right people, in building the right culture, and of course training them and developing the team further in a very conscious way would be my second advice.
Okay. And your third?
And the third, there's so many things that I could put third, but I think maybe number 3 should be just, hang in there, and it will get tough at some point, and it will get difficult at some point. And if everybody would just give up when it becomes difficult, then not much would actually get to the next level. We have had many, many tough periods. Financially, we've struggled in so many different ways, and you just need to be prepared for that and just accept it, and just accept that when things get hard, that's when you learn the most.
Yeah.
And just try to get out of the problems as soon as possible, learn as much as possible, and then afterwards be proactive so that you don't make the same mistakes again.
And what legacy would you like to leave? Or how would you like to be remembered?
Well, I am on a mission to change the medical paradigm, and I've been on that mission now for 23 years.
Yeah.
And that is by far the legacy that I want to leave, is to change the medical paradigm. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter so much to me, you know, if the history books will put my name next to it or not. Actually, I don't care.
Yeah.
But that is a legacy I want to leave, is to change the medical paradigm to one where we acknowledge that the body has its self-healing, self-regulating mechanisms that we need to support rather than override, that we need to make the right choices in life, and that also by utilization of the latest technological advancements, we can do things in non-invasive ways much more effectively, without causing any harm, and that we should focus on restoring health problems and helping people thrive and make the most out of life instead of just coping with things.
Yes. Well, thanks so much, Thomas, for joining us. And if people want to connect with you, what are the best platforms to do so?
Well, I think that would probably be through our website, healthoptimizing.com.
Okay.
I get hundreds of emails every day. I wish I had time to reply to them, but I don't. So I think going through the team would be the best way to reach me.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, and hopefully we can have you back in the future to see where you're going in your journey. And thanks for your time.
Well, thank you very much for having me.